Hey guys, welcome back to Falcon Central Radio, part of the Pro Football Central Radio Network. I am one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman, joined as usual by my co-host Matt Karoly. Today we're going to be talking about the Falcons' upcoming matchup with the Los Angeles Rams, as well as break down some film of their Week 6 loss to the Arizona Cardinals. And as usual on this show, we start things off by talking about any roster moves. And as usual, as you guys regularly watch, Tuesday is the Falcons roster move day, so we do have a couple of moves that we want to break down. The Falcons waived a punter. Now they only have 6 punters on the roster by cutting Matt Wiley with an injury settle. They brought back John Wetzel, who's been on and off the roster several times over the last couple of weeks, and they re-signed Carson Meyer, their tight end slash H-back, to the practice squad, another guy that has been on and off the team the last couple of weeks. Any of these moves stick out for you, Matt?
Not really. It was to be expected that John Wetzel would make his return back for like the millionth time this season. Kind of starting to feel bad for the guy. Hopefully, I guess he's racking up those air miles and stuff. But unfortunate for a while. I guess that quad or whatever he was dealing with is a little bit more severe than we thought. And now we're on to our third punter, Casey Redford, who showed well in his outing on Sunday. So, I guess hopefully he doesn't befall the same injury luck that Weil and Bosher before him has. But I think the biggest roster news doesn't even involve the Falcons. Just before we went on the air, a little bit of breaking news: Jalen Ramsey got traded to the Rams after an hour or two before Marcus Peters got traded to the Ravens. You had to figure something was coming. They wouldn't just, leave Troy Hill and rookie David Long to cover Julio Jones. And it turns out they made the big coup for Ramsey. So, curious to get your thoughts, Aaron. Kind of a mind-blowing move. Didn't really think that that's what the Rams were necessarily going to do, given that they gave 2 first-round picks up. You kind of thought they were thinking more for the future and future salary cap ramifications. But what are your thoughts there about Ramsey, Julio coming a few weeks earlier than maybe originally intended with the Jaguars matchup in Week 16?
Well, I like the move for the Rams. Peters hadn't played all that well in his time there. We thought when they got Peters and Aqib Talib, it would be sort of the perfect pairing for this Wade Phillips defense, and he would have a similar dynamic that he had in Denver with like guys like Roby and Talib and Chris Harris, but that wasn't really the case. So I think in a lot of ways, potentially Jalen Ramsey marks a significant upgrade for them. So I like that move. And I also like the fact that the reality is, even though the Rams kind of ruined this by paying Jared Goff this summer, but I think the Rams sort of know their window is for a limited time, and trying to maximize that window and win now, I think makes a lot of sense. And again, they kind of ruined it by paying Jared Goff, but I do feel like they're at least still for the next year or two in this idea of, okay, well, given some of the issues that Todd Gurley's having and whether he's going to have the longevity that they want, given some of the issues that Jared Goff has shown in some of his recent performances, whether or not he's going to wind up sticking long-term there. So I think it makes a lot of sense if the Rams think Jalen Ramsey is the piece that they thought Marcus Peters would be, as sort of their number one corner. It makes a lot of sense for them. And then, when they traded Marcus Peters today, and you look at sort of the devastation at that cornerback group, given, Aqib Talib going on IR earlier, it does sort of, indicate that a move was imminent. And I heard some rumors that, this Ramsey trade was going to happen. So the fact that it happened so quickly, I think, isn't a complete surprise, but certainly, a big move for the Rams.
It's interesting too, because I was kind of surfing, Turf Show Times, the SB Nation blog for the Rams, Twitter feed and the Rams Wire and stuff. And, they pointed out that the Rams under this regime has never locked up one of their, cornerbacks that was scheduled to hit free agency. So I'm assuming that's all going to change with Ramsey based on the fact that what they had to give up to get him. But, they did something similar, not of this magnitude, when they got Peters in the first place, giving up a 2nd and 4th round pick and turned out just to use, him as a rental in this Super Bowl window. Again, I don't necessarily think that's going to happen in Ramsey's case, but it would be shocking if they end up doing the same thing. But again, these windows are fleeting, so it may be worth it if they get a Super Bowl out of it. But it certainly changes, this week's matchup. I was a lot more excited about it without, Aqib Talib and Marcus Peters in the building. Now with Ramsey, I think it shifts the balance of power a little bit more back to the Rams side. But again, we'll get into that a little bit later on the show. But certainly huge news in the NFL world involving, with ramifications of this Sunday's matchup.
And, I should have plugged this at the top. We will be taking callers later on in the show. I know we got a couple of people chomping at the bit to jump in. Right now, we're not going to be adding any callers until we get through sort of the film portion of the show, which is coming up, where we'll break down a couple of plays on the All-22. But immediately, as soon as we're done wrapping that up, or towards the end of that, if you guys want to sort of jump in, the link is in the stream over on YouTube. If for all you audio listeners, you should definitely be checking out the video portion of the show live on YouTube. But if you're in the chat right now on YouTube, you can see the link for that to jump in, and we'll add you to the show on the back half of the show when we stop, with the film breakdowns, and we start to move towards more focusing on this Rams game, and you guys can share your questions, your thoughts on all things, and you guys can sort of steer the ship as far as the content of this show goes. But without further ado, Matt, you want to jump into the All-22 since we know people are chomping at the bit to get on the show?
Yeah, let's do it. This week we kind of want to take you through a couple more plays than usual. In the past, we've only gone through two. But there are a lot more stood out, I think, for me in this one. Some good, some bad. We're going to start with the good, actually, which I don't believe we've talked about much good in our All-22 breakdowns the last several weeks. So, for me, I liked what I saw from Dirk Koetter this week. This is probably the first week I could say that. This play right here, the flea flicker, really not something I don't think we've seen from this playbook at all as far as this route concept goes. And I was telling Aaron before we came on the show, every time I saw the Falcons go to heavy, this 13 personnel, 3 tight end look, I said to myself, okay, Falcons are dialing up a run play. It's going to be predictable. Dirk showing up. And he actually proved me wrong on pretty much every time that happened. And this was the first example of it. Flea flicker to Ito, back to Ryan. And Jaden Graham kind of leaked out to the left-hand side, uncovered for a pretty big gain. So again, this is the stuff that we kind of were hoping for from Dirk. As far as, for me, the predictability was my biggest concern from him. I didn't see a whole lot of predictableness for the most part. There was one drive, I think it was the second drive of the game. Falcons were forced into a 2nd and 25 due to penalties, and kind of I saw a pretty lazy effort as far as play calling goes to try to pick up that first down. But other than that, this game kind of reminded me of last year's Falcons when Sark was at its peak, and you can tell the offense was rolling and Matt was in control. And I got those similar vibes this week, and this was a play that kind of brought those feelings upon me. So Aaron, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, but I guess you're rolling right into the next one.
I think you're where you exactly said rolls right into the next one, where we saw the tight end throwback, which is something that everybody has been begging for the Falcons to utilize in their offense since Kyle Shanahan left, because it was such a big part of how the Falcons were able to sort of make players like Levine Toilolo and Austin Hooper and Jacob Tanny be effective weapons in their passing game back in 2016. And we didn't really see much of that in 2017. We didn't see much of it in 2018. And we saw Arizona, attack the Falcons with this in this game, and then the Falcons hit them back with a similar one. And one of the things that we've talked about on the show is the lack of outside zone stuff that the Falcons have been utilizing so far this season. And this week they did use a little bit more outside zone runs. It wasn't overly effective. So that kind of wastes the theory that that's one of the reasons why the run game isn't working. But it did help set up some of their play action stuff, where you see this outside zone look that sells the run fake, and then Hooper sort of leaks out the back and makes that big play. You can sort of see that delay where he shows off where he's initially blocking and then sort of fights his way through traffic and everybody's sucked up by the run and he's wide open down the seam. So as Matt said, we have not been too praising of Dirk Cutter on this show over this season, but I do think he's making incremental improvements by essentially doing some of the stuff that we had grown accustomed to in previous seasons from an offensive standpoint. So, Matt, if you don't have anything else to add, we can talk a little bit
it's
more.
worth pointing out, too. I mean, when we had Blake Allen Murphy on the show last week, he talked about the possibility of Austin Hooper having a big day because the Cardinals have struggled with tight ends. And I think credit, deserves to be heaped a little bit on Dirk Cutter and the coaching staff for seeing that and using some of these elements of the playbook from years past and featuring the tight ends in certain roles like this, like the tight end throwback or the flea flicker with the tight end lead concept attached to it. And again, we haven't seen a lot of stuff from the coaching staff to say, hey, yeah, there's a noticeable game planning element to their play calling. I think this week you can see a little bit of that, at least from the offensive standpoint. Now, again, I guess the one downside is them getting off to a slow start still and having to work from behind. But I kind of saw them turning a corner a little bit. And again, maybe we could say the same things about the Indianapolis game where they really showed and got out to that surge in the second half to climb back. And hopefully that's not the case because, again, I saw some creativity here that we haven't seen all season. Hopefully that can carry forward because if it is going to be a down year, at least let's have the offense be entertaining and light up the scoreboard. If the defense is what it is, all right, so be it. But at least the offense clicking and playing well is a positive and some momentum maybe to carry forward to future years. So speaking of the defense and it being what it is, we're going to get to the bad here because, again, the defense was not good, allowing 34 points to this Cardinals offense. And it started pretty early on, and we're going to highlight this Damiere Byrd play. Falcons are in their cover 3, base defense, and I guess we'll run it through once.
Yeah, run it through once, and
we'll talk kind of what happens. It's kind of a domino effect that leads to this happening. So
what you're going to see, guys, is this is essentially this is what play action does. They're going to do their little read option fake that's going to hold both Ishmael and Oliver's eyes in the backfield, and because it holds Ishmael's eyes and as well as these linebackers, Larry Fitzgerald's going to sort of leak out of the crossing route, and that sort of crossing pattern is going to hold Ricardo Allen to not play his deep responsibilities in this cover 3 because Oliver's keying on the run. He's not necessarily getting on his horse to cover his deep third of the field. And because he's going to have inside safety help, he's not going to necessarily play it like that. And so it's kind of this domino effect where the run action in the backfield holds Ishmael. That leads to Ricardo Allen getting held in over the middle, as you can see with Larry Fitzgerald. And you see where Ricardo Allen's eyes are at this point in time. Isaiah Oliver is now realizing, oh, crap, I got to run to defend the deep ball. And at that point in time, Oliver doesn't have the makeup speed. Allen doesn't have the makeup speed to recover from that standpoint. Anything you want to add, Matt?
No, I mean, I guess I prefaced by saying, this is the bad of the defense. But to be honest, I think some credit needs to go to the offense. The Cardinals dialing up, a good play action, as I think Aaron and I are both huge fans of. You can see why play action has a high success rate around the league. I mean, it works. It affects the defense. It puts stress on it. And, it just created that domino effect with, Campbell and Ishmael kind of biting down. And then it puts, Ricardo Allen in the deep center of the field, kind of in a tough spot. He has to then cover, jump up on Larry Fitzgerald as the deep crosser. But then at the same time, since he jumps down on there, Isaiah Oliver's thinking that he has safety help, and he turns out he doesn't because of Ricardo Allen biting down. And at that point, the rep is lost. Kyler Murray makes a great throw. We can argue that this probably should have been a fumble recovered by the Falcons, and that would have changed the course of the game. But the officiating is what the officiating is around the league right now. But yeah, this was just, a well-executed play from the Cardinals. And I don't know if you can necessarily put it on one individual player like you can on certain other plays in this game. But, yeah. So again, there's certain aspects of it where guys are having coverage lapses. I'm not sure necessarily if this is one of those plays. The next play we kind of want to get into, and this was one that drove me nuts. It's these third and long conversions. Look, if you're going to be even a competent defense in this league, you got to get off the field on third and longs. And, the first 3 third and longs that the Falcons faced in this game, they allowed the Cardinals to convert all 3 of them. One was this one here. They're in cover 3 again. And if you just look at the formation there, I mean, you would think that this is a 3rd and 15 or a 3rd and 16 play. No, this is 3rd and 8. And for whatever reason, Isaiah Oliver's 13 yards off the line of scrimmage. Kendall Sheffield, the same thing. Cardinals just ran a simple cover 3 beater. Larry Fitzgerald runs a hitch at the sticks, and it's an easy conversion, pitch and catch. It's like they're in practice. There's very little pass rush affecting them on this play. But again, when he gets the ball out of his hands in less than 2.5 seconds, there's really not a whole lot you can throw blame on the pass rush on this one. So again, this isn't really on any of the individual players. And again, we've highlighted a lot of plays in the past where you can place the blame on 1 or 2 players. For me, I'd put this on the coaching staff. I put this on Dan Quinn, the play caller. This is just too soft in this position to be allowing these types of plays. And it's unfortunate because, again, the players did their responsibilities there. They were just put in a bad spot.
Yeah. As Matt said, it is more on the play call. It's a 3rd and 8. Here's the sticks. Normally, the Falcons typically run man coverage in that situation, and you wonder why Dan Quinn decided to go with a more cover 3 zone look. Was he worried about Kyler Murray's ability to run and convert in that situation? Okay, I guess. I'm not quite sure if Murray had really gashed him up to that point with his legs quite yet, but maybe I'm misremembering some plays.
I don't recall that he did.
I know he got him later in the game, but I don't know if it was, I don't know if he really had hurt them up to that point, really. So, you do, as Matt said, you do wonder a little bit about some of the play calling stuff on the defensive side of the ball, and that's been a major issue that people have discussed with this team, certainly in recent weeks, and you continue to see some of the breakdowns with this defense and allowing some of the big plays. And as Matt said, I don't think any of these plays really highlight, specifically, hey, this player is breaking down. Certainly we can probably, watching the film earlier today, I can go through about 10 plays and find issues with, in my opinion, Devondre Campbell and Kamal Ishmael.
Right.
And that leads us to sort of our topic that we want to discuss further. And again, I will remind you guys at this point in time, if you do want to join the chat, you can. The link is in the YouTube chat. So if you guys want to jump in and pepper us with your questions, by all means, you can do so. But one of the topics I discussed on Twitter, I'm sure Matt has also discussed this as well on Twitter, and we're going to discuss it right now on the show, is whether or not the Falcons can fix some of these issues that they've been dealing with, particularly the mental errors and the lapses and the miscommunications and all these various things, by shuffling some of their personnel on the defensive side of the ball. And, speaking of Kamal Ishmael, speaking of Devondre Campbell, it does seem like those 2 positions, in addition to Isaiah Oliver, who struggled quite a bit this season, but given the injury to Desmond Trufant, you wonder if, the Falcons fully want to turn the page to Jordan Miller at this point in time. But I know, Matt, you're a big fan of Jordan Miller. At this point in time, I don't think really the downside is much given how Oliver has played. But I think primarily, that strong safety position at weak side linebacker spot, getting guys like Ola Kuhn, getting guys like Jermaine Grace at the linebacker spot, getting a little bit more rotation with those guys in the lineup, as well as, Sherrod Niesman. I mean, I think Jamal Carter is a pretty good player. I think he's a better safety than Kamal Ishmael is. So I wouldn't mind seeing him as well. And particularly when you go back to this Cardinals game, the Falcons played a ton of cover 2. in this game, and it seemingly would make a lot more sense that playing cover two if DeMonte Casey is your other safety or a Sherrod Niesman is your other safety, given that sort of deep responsibility that he now added to his repertoire by playing, free safety this year. So it seems like that would be the best usage of the Falcons personnel. But Matt, I'm curious what your thoughts are, and I know we do have a caller coming in. You want to give those before we let Justin join the show?
Yeah, no, I don't have much to add. I mean, all of what you said makes sense. I'd certainly be in favor of adding KZ to the safety rotation, and that's where you would allow Jordan Miller to maybe see the field and have Sheffield be the nickel, Oliver be one of the outside corners, and Miller being the other. But Justin, welcome to the show again. Like to get your thoughts on this too, as far as who you might want to see from the bench get some snaps, or whatever else is on your mind. The floor is yours, sir.
Hey, so just by the way, I was at the Cardinals game, so that was kind of cool to go to. But in terms of bringing in new guys, I just think Devondre Campbell and Kamal Ismail, I think those are the two guys that we just know aren't good. Why not get Sherrod Niesman and Foya Aluakon some run,
Yeah, I mean, if I was ranking it, those are the first two I'd want to see out of there, because those guys are the most veteran guys of the bunch of players that aren't playing well. Whereas, again, Isaiah Oliver, second year, first time starter, you got to expect some lumps. Maybe we didn't expect this many lumps so early, but you still kind of have to ride him and kind of get him those reps and be able to develop him. Whereas I think you've seen all you need to see of Campbell to know what type of player he is. Same with Ishmael. He's been around even longer. So yeah, I'm certainly in favor. That's the first thing I want to see. I'd want to see Olakun and Grace get some work at linebacker, and then as Aaron and I have said ad nauseum, I don't know why this coaching staff doesn't give Sherrod Niesman the time of day. I mean, you would thought he would have earned it in his spot duty last year, but apparently that wasn't the case for whatever reason. But I think now at this point, it's negligence on the part of this coaching staff. It's costing them games, and it's ultimately going to cost them their job. So yeah, I'm all for Niesman and Olakun and Grace.
Yeah, I agree. And in terms of Oliver, I think for now we should let him take his lumps because he's struggled some. But if we get to this point next season and this is still happening, kind of like with Duke Riley, he's probably not that bad. But if he doesn't show improvement by next year, then I think we might have to start realizing that he might not be what we thought he was going to be.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I agree with all that.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. We got a couple other people waiting in line to jump on the show, but we appreciate you joining us tonight to get your questions answered, and we look forward to talking with you in the future, my friend.
All right, thank you.
All right, have a good night, Justin.
Thanks, Justin.
All right, we have Zamir Sabanovich. What's up, Zamir?
Hey, guys, how's it going?
Hey, Zamir. Good to hear from you again.
Well, we lost, even though I didn't think we're going to lose.
Yeah, that prediction didn't work out so well, huh?
Technically, I didn't guarantee the victory. I just didn't see the way that we're going to lose.
That's fair. You weren't as adamant as John was. That's for sure. I remember it that way.
Yeah, but still, we find the way to lose.
Every week there's a crazier way.
As a Falcon fan, we should be accustomed to it, or we shouldn't be surprised, which is a really sad way to feel about, because we as a fans, we don't deserve to feel this way. But why I came on this show is actually I wanted to speak to your listeners, to speak to our fans, kind of
Okay.
the issue the plea. First, if I may, I would bring a couple points. First one is our offense deserve most of the blame for this loss. Only 10 points in first half against this Cardinals team is ridiculous. And every loss, we score 3 points or 7 points or 10 points, which tells me first half is when we plays are scripted, when we should execute the game plan, which tells me we are not prepared to execute anything. And then in second half, we just have to go for it. We don't have other chance.
Yeah, I mean, there's good and bad. The good, obviously, like you said, it shows a team that's not well prepared, and that's kind of what Aaron and I have been saying kind of for the past several weeks as far as these slow starts. That's on the coaching staff. But at the same time, as we noted in the All 22, I think there was an element of game planning. There was an element of adjustments, dialing up play action more in the second half. All good things. So,
But
again,
why that can happen in first
why
half?
did it take so long? That's
we
a great
wait
question.
that
That's a
long?
great question.
And
Yeah.
and at this point, I was always Dan Quinn's defender,
Right.
but at this point, I question his intelligence. Actually, you send a three man rush,
Mm-hmm.
and you want a Tyler Davison in coverage.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
In what point? I don't believe when he was 10 years he played in coverage, let alone when he's now 300 pounds, no tackle, you want him to play in coverage.
It's a head scratcher.
Somebody as Dan, experienced as Dan Quinn, should know that better, but I guess he doesn't. One thing that I want to point is about Matt Bryant. I was really heartbroken to see him miss that extra point. When you remember, Aaron, I don't know if you read my email when he was cut. I was really upset, and I wrote you about it because he's, in my opinion, Hall of Famer, and is icon for Falcons team for 10 years plus years, and he shouldn't be treated that way. And to see him just cut and don't resign him for, I don't know, a couple of millions, it's really ridiculous. But I understood why we felt that way, because we had a high expectation for that this season, and we couldn't rely on him to stay healthy. And what if we lose him for few games, and we lost those games, and every game is count. So I understood, but as a Falcon fan, I didn't want to see that way. And then all that happened when Tavecchio started losing his cool and losing his job, and we signed him. My first thought, it was, oh crap, because at that moment dawned to me, what if he start falling off the cliff? What if finally his age
You're talking
creeps up
Bryant now?
Matt Bryant.
Yeah.
What if
I don't know. I don't think that's what happened. I don't think that's what happened with this kick.
I know. I'm just saying I would hate it to see that happen, because he already missed a couple of kicks, and then this very important extra point.
I mean, what do you think is worse? What do you think is worse? Never knowing, if Matt Bryant still got it and still can kick at a high level for you, or at least bringing him back?
For him, it would be better if he didn't.
If he just went out on a high note?
He would.
I mean, that's why I did
end his career on high note. He would be a revere. But now, if he, for example, what if the next game he missed a game-winning field goal?
Right. Well, that's why I caution people to not put this on Matt Bryant or badmouth Matt Bryant, because first of all,
that's why I wanted to speak to
right, and let the people know. I appreciate that, because I would have said the same thing tonight.
Thing is, in my time, we didn't have a Twitter, we didn't have a social media.
Mm-hmm.
Our Twitter was graffiti on bathroom wall, in bathroom stall, on gas station, or restroom. That was graffiti. You write whatever you want there, and whoever reads it. Now on Twitter, everybody engaging, and what I want to talk to fans about: stay united. Do not let somebody, and I'm talking to you, Aaron, stir up the fights between you fans is about Matt Ryan or about.
You're getting put in timeout, Aaron. You've been a bad boy.
It's not just Aaron. There's a ton of.
I understand. I've seen it too. I've seen it too, Zamir. Yeah.
At this point, you cannot change anybody's opinion. What opinion they hold for Matt Ryan or for Julio Jones. You cannot change that. If you don't like it, just don't engage.
Yeah.
Because if you engage and you get offended by it, it's your fault, your own fault. And you're giving those people who trashing our team, who trashing our players constantly, you're giving them platform by engaging them. Just ignore them.
Wise words. Yeah, easier said than done sometimes, but yeah, wise words.
Yeah.
Yes, I like. If you want to discuss different points, that's fine. But to get in the fights, when I see, I am a member of multiple Falcons fan groups on Facebook. You know, fans comes, just the Falcon fans comes and talk about the team, and I notice a lot of them have those haters who just find any little thing about Matt Ryan, about Julio Jones, about any player, any little thing, and just when we lose, they just start bringing it up.
Yeah,
and it's like Skip Bayless or Ron Parker who hate LeBron. They're gonna bring free throw when he misses free throw in the first half, in the first quarter. Oh, that was, like a cause for loss. And they always find something to criticize. And I would like to see our fans to stay united, to not let the people, and I'm talking to you, Aaron, stir up a fight between us. Let us stay behind our team, stay positive. But I have to say, a lot of times when I thought, when we lost, for example, when we lost a Super Bowl, I was expecting to be even worse, feeling worse. But then I listened to your podcast and I felt better. There's instances when you can talk us out of walking on a ledge. If I don't know if I'm saying that metaphor well, but you can keep us kind of grounded and keep us on a positive way. And I just I at this point, I still believe that this team can do something, because we have a bunch of divisional play coming up, and this Cardinals loss against Cardinals, it hurts me really, because I was thinking if we can get 2-6 before bye, and then we have 5 consecutive games against divisional play, and 6 altogether, we should be still in the play, because you never know in divisional games.
Yeah.
But I at this point, I don't know where we're going to find the second win.
Hey, keep the faith. Again, we appreciate all that you offered to the fans. I think it's all good stuff. And
thanks for the kind words, Amir, about the podcast. We got Johnny on deck. I'm sure he wants to join in because he's been Mr. Let's keep it positive. The season's going to get back on track.
Yeah, thanks, Zamir.
But thanks again, Zamir, for your words to the fans out there, as well as your support for the show and whatnot. So we'll talk to you later. Have a good night, my friend. All right. We have Mr. Johnny, who was practically guaranteeing a win last week against the Cardinals. Famous last words.
Hey, much respect for still showing the face around here after it. I mean,
I think, John, your microphone is muted, so if you could unmute there, we can get your feedback.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys.
But not on you, man. It's not on you.
On the bright side, I think I found a huge solution, and one that I'm learning as a football coach myself, like how to run certain formations and why players are put in certain positions. And I think I finally figured out Vic Beasley's role. And
Let's hear it.
he doesn't have to rush every play. That's the thing. He could either play spy, he could play like a delayed coverage, delayed blitz. That's where the D line is all screwed up because Vic is constantly rushing in, and the offensive line already knows like he's not really going to get by me through a bull rush, and he could try going around, and I'm just going to let him go all the way around. The QB will step up, he'll dump it off, or he'll just get rid of it and run to the sideline.
I mean, I think that's a drum Aaron's been kind of beaten for a while now, right, Aaron? Kind of, as far as him not being a pass rusher, more of a
My question is,
linebacker, I guess.
why wasn't Aaron more like? I guess I can't really argue. I should have caught the signal, but
He was pretty demonstrative about it. If that's where you were going,
he was. I mean, he did it for a long time. I'm not even talking about just this year, but he's done it for a long time, and I can't believe I took so long to figure it out.
Well, you're not the only one. I mean, I was at fault.
Look, I think everybody wanted Vic Beasley to be this thing. And
2016 was the problem. 2016, gave us the wrong impression of what he is.
Yeah, and I think people, looked at the numbers, looked at the sacks, and look, 15 and a half sacks is great and wonderful. And I don't think people were really looking at how he was getting those sacks, the fact that he didn't, he kind of stopped getting those sacks after a certain point in the season. That Rams game was really kind of his last hurrah. He got a couple of sacks after that, but they were all pretty much as a cleanup guy, as a spy guy. And by that point, he had 13 sacks, and no one really cared that he kind of disappeared for the last 3 games of the regular season. No one cared that he disappeared in the playoffs because it was just he's 13 sacks. And I think we all, even myself, I thought, okay, well, Vic Beasley isn't the thing that I think people think he is right now, but it's only his second year, and he's only going to continue to build on this. And then when he kind of came out of the gates in 2017 and sort of looked like the player that he looked at the end of the season, which was a non-factor as a pass rusher, for me at least, because I already had that in the back of my mind of this guy kind of disappeared down the stretch, I was like, okay, he's not going to be the pass rusher I thought he was. And then that's when they moved him to linebacker. So I was all about let's see where this goes. Let's explore this. And then everybody else was just kind of he's not getting the sack numbers, and this is wrong, and he needs to go back to doing the thing that he did before to get the sack numbers. And then 2018, he went back and didn't produce. And then I think only now, within the last year, sort of people realized that 2016 season kind of led everybody astray. Sort of that he could be.
And, honestly, John, I mean, the fact that you finally realized it, we all finally realized it, it makes it all the more perplexing that the coaching staff and the front office hasn't really caught on to it or didn't catch on to it before this year and decided to sink that $12.9 million fifth-year option on it, which, again, really limited what the team can do as far as helping the rest of this roster, which, clearly is a little bit lacking or has less talent than what we gave it credit for. Because, again, he showed this kind of the last 2 years of not really being a pass rusher and being more of a linebacker or an Anthony Barr type player where, again, shouldn't be rushing the passer every time, should be more in coverage at times and, setting an edge at Sam linebacker and all the other responsibilities that Sam linebacker supposed to have.
We're not even talking a coverage drop down. It could be a 2-yard coverage literally, and just
something in the flats or something. Yeah,
the field, and I mean you could get the running back. And another big problem with the defense is they're not gap filling at all. I mean, not even compared to 2016, the gaps were just plugged.
Yeah, and that's what I always used to say when Keanu Neal went down last year is that was going to be one of the bigger impacts that his loss would have is he was rock solid in that regard. And, my biggest issue is the guys on the back end aren't doing a good enough job filling those gaps in run support. I mean, I've been pretty impressed with the 3 down linemen, Bailey, Davison, and Jarrett. But beyond that, in the run, because again, they've been improved in the run. They're still seventh in defensive DVOA in the run, but they're still a little bit lacking. Especially the first week was a prime example of it, of guys not doing their job on the back end. But yeah, I would agree with that statement. The linebackers secondary haven't been doing their part in the run game.
Yeah, and I've been critical of Deion Jones this season because I think he kind of has been a little underwhelming the last couple of weeks. But I do think this Arizona game he did play one of the better games we've seen from him since like the first 2 games of the year. So hopefully, I think one of the issues the team is dealing with all across their entire roster is I don't know if their best players have been playing up to their level. I think Grady Jarrett has been. I think outside of that, you can't really say anybody else is playing at the level that we've grown accustomed to the last couple of years. And if Deion Jones can get back to playing better, it'll at least make the defense maybe okay. I mean, they're still probably terrible. I don't know, but
I think it goes back to, honestly, again, we're seeing the same mistakes over and over again. That's why we said here just a bit ago, I want to see Olakun and Grace play more. I want to see Niesman, because Dan Quinn talked about, when Keanu first went down again this year, that we might see the same type of rotation where Niesman's in coverage and Ishmael may be the rundown defender. I want to see those guys get some time because it can't get much worse than it's been. And some of the guys on the bench have shown that they can play and be effective when they're out there. So, I want to see that. I think that's the only way this defense kind of turns the corner because the guys that they're rolling out there, again, same mistakes week in and week out.
Yeah, it's a little embarrassing when your head coach has to play semi-GM and, Dimitrov can't get rid of a few of these guys that have keeping a seniority.
You're harder on Dimitrov than Quinn, aren't you?
Yeah, the money is a big issue to me, and I took business in college, so I'm still learning things of that nature, and it's kind of embarrassing when he's got to take over those duties and tell a player like, hey, we're going to go in a different direction. Like, it's not the way it's supposed to work, and I'm sure the Patriots don't roll that way.
Well, again, I think Dimitrov and Quinn both signed off on moves like locking in that 5th-year option for Vic. What's another bad one? I mean, that's the one that stands out. Aaron will probably want to talk about Sanu's contract and keeping that on the books. But I don't know of any other egregious ones other than the Beasley one. I feel like they've managed the money pretty well, but the Beasley one's obviously just so bad. Again, I think Thomas Dimitrov and Dan Quinn are a partnership. That's why I think when Dan Quinn goes down, Dimitrov's going to go down with him. I think they've equally been at fault. I don't think anyone's been worse than the other. I mean, maybe you can argue, though. I'd argue probably Quinn's been worse than Dimitrov.
Certainly this year.
Yeah. So that's why I don't get the level of Dimitrov criticism from you as much. But again, I understand criticizing Dimitrov because I do think he's been at fault in certain aspects, certain personnel decisions. I highlighted one this past week with, Luke Stocker being your best answer at tight end too, when this draft class was a pretty good tight end draft class. For me, that was because then you'd have a little bit of leverage on the Austin Hooper contract negotiations. I still think, regardless, they're going to extend Hooper. But if you got a guy like Foster Moreau, who's a guy I was pounding the table for to be that tight end too, and he's starting to come along in Oakland, you have a little bit more leverage to move on from Hooper if the money got too big. So again, he's made some head scratching decisions, but at the same time, I don't think he's been any worse than what Dan Quinn's done from the head coaching position.
Yeah, and I over or under is my last question on Vic Beasley. Do you think he gets 3 sacks this week?
3 this week or 3 this year for the remainder of the year?
Oh God, 3 this week.
I mean, again, I talked up the Rams, and we'll get into it in a little bit. I talked up the Rams.
The Rams right tackle, isn't it Havenstein?
Yeah, and I guess, I mean, are you trying to elicit memories of that 2016 game, John, when he beat Havenstein for 3? I mean, maybe we get that Vic, and again, Havenstein hasn't been playing well, but No, I'd probably still go under 3 for the entire rest of the season.
Yeah.
For Vic.
I mean, Havenstein shut him down in that playoff game.
Yeah.
He had basically realized, all he is he's a one-note
Right.
speed rusher.
Right.
If I can stay in front of his speed, you can stop him. So
Again, Havenstein hasn't been as good as he's been last season, but I'd still lean towards Havenstein shutting him down or limiting him. We got to look for the pass rush elsewhere this week. I think it's a good match. I think Grady Jarrett can feast this week. Joe Nokum's out for the year, so
the way I would probably run it is I would have Tack line up against Havenstein, Adrian Claiborne at the right defensive end, Grady Jarrett inside at right defensive tackle so he can go against whoever that left guard is, and then have Alan Bailey or Jack Crawford go against the right guard. Austin Blythe, I think, is the right guard. So that would be my foursome. If I was going with it, and when I go to my nickel, that's going to be the 4 I roll with. But Vic Beasley didn't get his opportunity, so hopefully Tack can take care of business against Whitworth, and Grady still does his thing, and then Claiborne can do his thing and whatnot. So it may still work out fine that they'll be able to get pressure with the other 3 guys going up against their matchups. But I think if I'm looking at my foursome, and it's not to sit here and say that I wouldn't ever have Vic Beasley rush a quarterback. It's just like, I think if he's your 5th best pass rusher, that's really the best way of using him, like you pointed out, John.
Yeah.
And, I've been saying too, I want to see Campbell rush the passer a little bit. And, we talked about getting Olakun and Grace involved. And this could be an opportunity. If you have one of those guys, as the linebacker next to Deion Jones, you can have Campbell be that, 3rd or 4th edge rusher in nickel sets. I don't think we're going to ever see it, but this, again, this gives you an opportunity to do that. Keeping guys fresh more. Because both, Claiborne and Vic, I guess, they got knocked out of the game for a brief period against the Cardinals, and you're dangerously thin when that happens, and that's why, again, getting Campbell involved. We've seen Campbell a little bit from time to time at edge, but not as much of a featured role as I'd like. Because again, we've seen in the past, the Bears game in 2017 was an example where Campbell thrived off the edge, and I'm waiting for it to happen. I don't think we will, but for me, that this is an opportunity when he's struggling in coverage to use him in a different role and again, to kind of stimulate the pass rush.
Yeah. But anything you want to add, John, before we get you out of here?
Yeah, I just want to get on top of the Jalen Ramsey and Julio thing before it gets way out of hand. Julio, go out there, do your thing, and just bust them. That's all I got to say.
I'm excited for this too, because this is the first, regular season game where, Matt Ryan's going to face him too. And he was known for those comments he made about Matt before the 2018 season, and Matt went out and had MVP level numbers. So I'm excited to see Matt, show out, and it would be great. It'd be a great debut in our minds for them to put up a huge number on Jalen Ramsey with his new team.
Yeah. John, appreciate you coming on, joining us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, John.
Good thing that you did not guarantee any wins this week, which probably means the Falcons will probably wind up figuring out some way to beat the Rams and, ruining the tank as many people out there are hoping for.
All right, guys. Have a good night.
You too, man. Thanks again.
See you.
It's interesting that you brought up the prediction, Aaron, because I'm assuming we're going to get into some Rams talk here. Yeah. And, I'll say it. I'll put the kibosh on them and say that I think I have a weird feeling that they're going to get off the schneid this week against the Rams. Now, obviously the Ramsey trade makes me a little bit more hesitant on that. But, I kind of like this matchup. And as you said, the Falcons sometimes find weird ways to win when we least expect it. Again, I like certain aspects of this, and we might as well just get right into it. As far as, this Rams offensive line has struggled. Pro Football Focus has them rated as their worst in pass rush or pass blocking efficiency metrics. So again, we're asking for something we haven't seen all season to get going. But if there's any matchup for it to happen, it's this week's matchup. I think the last 2 weeks that probably goes, underrated is the fact that, we were playing two mobile quarterbacks in Deshaun Watson, Kyler Murray. We saw opportunities where they can affect him, but again, using their legs, keeping the plays alive, kind of didn't allow that to happen. In Jared Goff's case, he's more of a statue back there. He's not a mobile quarterback. So there's going to be opportunities to get hits on him. The Todd Gurley injury is one to monitor. It sounds like he's trending towards playing, but even with him playing, he hasn't been the same Todd Gurley. So, I think there's an opportunity to limit this Rams offense to a degree. Now, again, the Falcons haven't given us much of a reason to believe that's going to happen, but they matched up well with him in the 2017 playoffs. They're a very similar team. Again, they're desperate. Dan Quinn's fighting for his job. I like this matchup. And then on the offensive side of the ball, we've seen the Bucs Seahawks put up 30 plus points on them. The only thing that concerns me is one, obviously Aaron Donald. That's going to be the biggest thing you have to guard against. How do you contain him? How do you block him? You're not going to be able to stop him, but you just got to try to limit him. And then also the Rams have been pretty good at shutting down the run. They're 5th ranked against the run according to Football Outsiders DVOA rankings. That usually doesn't bode well when you can limit the Falcons offense, make them one-dimensional. So that's a concern of mine. But, again, if they can establish a little bit of a run game or just, again, go to the play action. You don't need the run game necessarily to establish it, as we've talked about, as the analytics, support. Just go to that play action. Matt Ryan was 12 of 12 for 153 yards and 2 touchdowns on play action this past week. Go to it. Go to it often. Go to it early. Keep going to it. Because if you can block Aaron Donald, sure, they got Jalen Ramsey now, but he hasn't been that great. And I know you've noted it on Twitter too. He hasn't been that great the last couple of years. So I think Julio can still win that matchup. I think this is a prime opportunity for Calvin Ridley to take off. I mean, we've seen him get involved a little bit slowly the last 2 weeks, but this could be a huge opportunity for him going up against, Troy Hill or David Long, the rookie from Michigan. So I think, they can win. They can put up another 30 burger. It's just a matter of, can the Falcons offense maybe limit the Rams to the 20s? And if they can do that, again, I think the Falcons can win this game, 31 to 21 or 31-24, something like that. So yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb and say the Falcons, ruin the take, spoil the embrace for Chase movement that I've been pushing on Twitter, and get their second win.
Yeah, I mean, look, at this point in time, anything with this Falcon team, like the one game that you're like, oh, they're definitely losing this game. They'll find a way to win, and do whatever they do. I think you're right in terms of what the game plan should be. I think they should fully embrace the play action passing game as sort of their go-to option, particularly early in the game, to sort of help try to keep Aaron Donald at bay and prevent him from being able to pin his ears back. I'm not a huge fan of the hashtag establish the run movement that the Falcons seem to be embracing. I know there's a lot of people out there that still believe that you need to establish the run in order to open up the play action. That's not true at all. That's obvious from the fact that if you looked at the Falcons play action passing game early in 2018, they were one of the better teams in terms of play action passing, but one of the worst rushing teams in the league. They were even worse than they are right now. So it's one of those things where they can dial up the play action instead of running the football on first downs. I think they need to be a little bit more willing to dial up those play action plays and try to attack down the field and take advantage of this Rams secondary that is pretty beat up. Yeah, they did add Jalen Ramsey, but it's not as if he's got like 3 days of practice with this team before he's going to be asked to shadow Julio Jones. So it's not exactly putting him in an ideal situation to come in and succeed. So it's all there. All that to say, it's all there. But I'm not going to go out on a limb on this over the Falcons team at this point in time. It's like they've used up all the goodwill that I've had, thinking that they would be able to figure it out. And as Matt said, they are making incremental improvements each and every week. They seem to do a little bit of something that you and I talk about they need to do. They've dialed up the play action a lot more the last couple of weeks. They They used a little bit more outside zone, as I discussed on the previous show, which again helped their play action. They're getting, as you say, Calvin Ridley a little bit more involved. But to be honest with you, all of that to say, I think it's really going, you're going to need this offense to get off to really the fastest start that they've gotten off to all year long, and not just come out and score in the first drive, but score in like their first 3 drives, which we really haven't seen from this football team. And in addition to that, you have to have this defense not give up the big play on the back end. And that's entirely dependent on his pass rush. And I think they have some favorable matchups, as you point out, with this offensive line, but I just do not trust the back end of this defense at any time they decide to play the zone, that they're not going to be able to handle their responsibilities, and that's going to create some opportunities for this McVay offense. And as we've seen the last couple of weeks, all of these teams, Tennessee, Houston, Arizona, had major question marks going into the Falcon game, and we figured, okay, this is an opportunity for the Falcons to handle their business, and the Rams are in the exact same boat, given all the moves that they've made, given all the issues they've had on offense, and the injuries and whatnot. So, will it be 4 for 4 for, get right games for the opposing team as opposed to the Falcons? I'm leaning that way right now, but, again, as Matt says, this team basically does the opposite of what you expect them to do. So we'll have to sort of see what happens.
And I think another point too, the reason why I kind of like this matchup, or at least the Falcons' defensive matchup, is I've seen it discussed a lot that opposing teams are having success utilizing the bare front against the Rams' offensive line, with their wide zone run game. And I think the run game is the engine of their offense. And the run game really hasn't gotten going. Obviously Todd Gurley's health has limited it. But also the blocking hasn't been great up front. And the Falcons, this is the type of front that they've converted to this season in the base defense. So I think there too, and they've been pretty good stopping the run this year, as we've noted. So if they can make, the Rams one-dimensional, again, I think they can get to Goff. It'd be important for the pass rush to get going early, knock, Goff off the spot, because, much like Matt Ryan, you can, if you get to him early, you can rattle him a bit. And that'll throw him off for the rest of the game. I think the 49ers did that well. This past week, we don't necessarily have the horses that they do, but I do think, as we've said, that there's individual matchups where Tack could win, where Grady can win, and maybe even Claiborne could be that third piece this week. So again, they haven't given us a reason to believe, but I just have a strange feeling based on some of the factors here, that this could be a game that they win that we kind of least expect, or when we saw the schedule come out, we probably wouldn't want to circle this one as a win. But the Rams certainly haven't played well. And again, I think, the thing I liked about how last week's game ended, and I know we talked about it on last week's show, as far as, will Dan Quinn get fired if they lose to the Cardinals? And you had brought up, well, there's a lot of variables, and it depends how they lose. They showed fight. They showed fight for their coach. They could have went down kind of like how they went down against the Texans or the Titans, but they at least fought hard to the very end. And it was unfortunate how it ended. But I think they're still going to play hard for him, for Dan Quinn. And again, coming home, I think they get it done for him. Again, I don't think they're going to go out. All these guys are prideful guys. No one wants to lose. And, we talked about the tank last year. These are guys that get paid. They're professionals. They don't want to just lose just because of some silly tank that we talk about for draft picks. We make jokes about it, but, this is their guys' day-to-day job. They're going to go down with a fight. And, I think this is a prime opportunity with a reeling Rams team entering their building with some new faces. They're banged up in certain spots. So I just think there's a lot at play, and for whatever reason, I have a strong feeling that I think they can get it done this week.
Well, speaking of tanking and speaking of the draft, you just brought it up. It's a good segue for a question we got in the chat. Your thoughts on Curtis Weaver, who if I'm not mistaken, that's
Boise State,
from Boise State, right?
Yeah, I haven't sat down really and studied any of these players in depth, but Curtis Weaver's a guy I've looked at a little bit. Right now I'd be cool kind of taking him in round 2 somewhere. Those opinions could change either positively or negatively, but yeah, he's definitely a guy I like, bigger, longer, more of a prototypical defensive end, that would fit for the Falcons.
Yeah, I watched a little bit of Curtis Weaver last year when I was checking out Durant Miles, the undrafted free agent the Falcons picked up this year from Boise State. So I saw a little bit of him, and I knew he was a guy that was highly rated by a lot of people and seen as a potential first-round pick. I didn't see a guy that immediately popped to me as a potential first-round guy from his tape last year. But again, I wasn't necessarily keen on him and really focused on watching him. I just kind of every now and then when Durant Miles wasn't doing anything, I was kind of peeking over at Curtis Weaver. So that was sort of my initial impression. I haven't really watched anybody this year. I think I saw like one AJ Epinesa game, and that's really about it this season as far as 2020 draft stuff goes in terms of the pass rushers.
Yeah.
So maybe he could have made significant improvements, as you often see with college players. So but yeah, I think right now, from my perspective, at least from that initial impression, he seems more to be a kind of a day 2 guy in my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
That would certainly, enhance the Falcons' current group right now. But I don't know if he's the guy that I sort of look at as like a future 10+ sack guy based off of that initial impression.
Right. Yeah. There's not a lot of edge rushers in this class right now that I would be comfortable taking a first-round pick on. Chase Young's obviously a top 3 to 5 player. Epinesa is a guy hasn't really done it for me yet. I'll have to watch him more in depth, in the winter. I'd take him in the first round. I wouldn't take him top 10. I don't know if I'd even take him top 15. I get Solomon Thomas vibes from him a little bit from what I've seen. And I just think, I don't know where his best position is going to be in the NFL. Beyond that, maybe Jabari Zuniga, first rounder that I like based on traits. But again, I have to do more homework on him. But other than that, I think there's more, the depth of this class for defensive ends is more on day 2. And that's where you would like a guy like Curtis Weaver. If you get a defensive tackle or some other position, if you don't get Chase Young in round 1, day 2 is where you can go, and there's going to be a lot of edge depth there. So, and Curtis Weaver falls into that category.
Okay. Matt, anything else you want to add before we get towards the end of the show right here?
No, I think I kind of talked about what I wanted to about the Rams game. Do we have other questions in the chat? I know there was some questions on the Twitter that I have up in front of me. If we want to talk about answer some of these.
Yeah, you can throw some of those up as I scroll through the chat to see if there's anything else pressing.
Okay. Well, the first one I see here is from one of our good fans, Brian, at your homeboy Brian. Now, he starts off by saying serious question. I don't know how serious this really is, but he says, do you think the Dolphins offense would dominate our defense or even beat the Falcons straight up?
Well, anything's possible in this league. And so right now, I don't have a lot of confidence in the Falcons beating anybody at this point in time.
Yeah.
Since, arguably Arizona, outside of Miami and Cincinnati is people thought was
I'd say Arizona and Tennessee are bottom 5. Well, I like Tennessee's roster. I think Mariota's holding them back. I was going to say they're a bottom 5 roster. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but Arizona definitely is a bottom 5 roster. Cincinnati and Miami, obviously, and we lost a bottom 5 roster just this past week. So, yeah, as you said, it can't put anything past this Falcons team. They're an enigma. I don't necessarily think they'd blow the Falcons out or anything like that, but winning a close game, if the Falcons make mistakes like they have been, sure, anything's possible.
Yeah.
So another one I have, unless you want to throw another one up.
I didn't see anything.
No? Okay. So from Falcons fan MVP at Ryan 2 Jones asks, and this is an interesting one, which I kind of was thinking about before the show tonight. Would you like to see Rex Ryan as a Falcons defensive coordinator? If not, who do you think could get this defense going that could be available in 2020? I'll let you go first, Aaron.
I'm sorry, I was reading through the chat. As you
Rex Ryan as a defensive coordinator. How do you feel about that? Or is there any other suggestions of guys you might have thought about in the last several days? given the state of this team, that could potentially be a good veteran defensive coordinator to bring on board?
I mean, really, I haven't really. I'll be honest. I haven't really thought about who I would like to see take over play calling,
Yeah.
because so much of that depends on who's going to be the head coach.
Right.
So you start with the head coach and then you figure it out from there. So because I haven't really thought about the head coach, then I haven't really even begun to thought about defensive coordinator. But my mindset is kind of like, at this point, given how the defense has played recently, how the defense has been called recently, I'm kind of at the point where anybody is better than what they're currently getting. So
Yeah.
I can't really, even if Rex Ryan isn't what my first choice, if they wound up picking Rex Ryan, I don't think I would be like, oh, that's a terrible hire. It's like, well, really kind of anybody would be better at this point in time than Dan Quinn and what he's doing right now. So I don't have a strong take on this.
Yeah, I'm in a similar position. It can't really get much worse. I think I've mentioned on the show in the past, I was a big fan of Rex Ryan. I wanted him to actually be the head coach instead of Dan Quinn in 2015. And, I got into a dark place for a couple of days when it didn't go my way. But as a defensive, since, hindsight's 2020, we saw it didn't really work out for Rex as a head coach. But as a defensive coordinator, yeah, I can get behind that. I think, we need a guy who's creative, doesn't just have a specific scheme and rolls that scheme out from time to time and relies on his talent. And I don't think Rex Ryan is that type of defensive coordinator. I think, he's exotic in his play calling. He blitzes quite a bit. So you do need to have the right personnel as far as corners go, and maybe we're not there yet. Or maybe that's a better spot for Desmond Trufant. I don't know. Because you can make the case that he hasn't been a great fit for Dan Quinn's defense. But I would get on board for that. I was actually thinking, and fans probably won't want to hear that, but I could see, again, I tweeted this out a week or so ago. I still think Mike McCarthy is one of the favorites probably in Arthur Blank's mind to be the head coach candidate, because I think he's going to want a more established head coach that's been around the block and has been in the playoffs. And, McCarthy's got a ring on his resume. I think he's going to want to go that route as opposed to the first year head coach route. Now I could be wrong on that. And maybe he picks my guy, which is Eric Bieniemy, but I tend to think that he's going to go the latter. And with that said, I think Mike McCarthy might pick a guy like Rex Ryan. I was kind of going through who potential defensive coordinator candidates for Mike McCarthy would be. None of them were too inspiring, and maybe a lot of them are older and probably don't want to coach anymore.
As long as it's not Dom Capers.
Yeah, I mean, I totally didn't even consider him.
God, if they hired Dom Capers, that would be the worst.
Yeah. So, I thought maybe Rex Ryan, Mike McCarthy, I mean, two big egos, and we'll see how they would coexist. But I can kind of see a future where that might happen. So if that's the case, again, I know fans wouldn't like it necessarily, but I could understand it. I could grow to accept it, because, as Aaron said, can it really get much worse than what we've dealt with the last 2 years? I hardly think so. So I'd give it a shot, and we'll see what happens. But Rex Ryan for defensive coordinator, you can sign me up for that.
I did find a question in the chat, but I'll answer your question or that question and follow up with your point about Mike McCarthy. I do think you're right. Like, if I was guessing sort of what Arthur Blank is going to want to do, I think he's going to want to hire a guy that has some experience, because he sort of believes that, this team already has the foundation in place to compete at the high level. And he's going to probably want to pull a John Gruden in terms of what Gruden did in Tampa Bay, sort of building off what Tony Dungy did, and get that team over the hump. So I do think in a lot of ways Mike McCarthy does make sense, if I'm, again, guessing on sort of what Arthur Blank's mindset is going to be at the end of the year. But again, a lot of unknown variables at that point in time. But we do have a question from Matt Tate in the chat. It is, do you think Matt Ryan has had a subpar season? This question is for Matt. I know how Aaron feels.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not been at the level last year necessarily was, although, again, I'm optimistic from what I've seen, what I saw in the Arizona game, that, Matt's turning corner here and going to start ramping up pretty soon. Aaron had talked about, his grades as far as kind of giving Matt Ryan, C's in a lot of the games. And I could see where he's coming from, and I wouldn't argue too much about that. I think maybe overall in the season, a B it would be my grade, because again, I feel like he got off to a very rocky start with the turnovers and the poor decisions. But as of late, like in the Arizona game, he made one bad throw to Calvin Ridley on a third down, in my opinion. Other than that, it was just throwaways, or everything else was rock solid from him. The Houston game was pretty solid too for the most part. So again, stringing back-to-back quality games, I'm hoping and optimistic he's turned the corner and going to start getting closer to that 2018 level play. And his numbers are certainly trending that way. Again, he's got good volume stats, but he also has some good efficiency stats as well. So the analytics are starting to lean in Matt Ryan's direction as well. But I do think he got off to a slow start, and it's not quite at the level of last year, but he's trending there now, and hopefully that continues with these next 2 games at home.
Yeah, as Matt indicated, I think Matt Ryan has had 4 questionable games for what we have come to know from Matt Ryan this past season. I think he did play well against Philadelphia, but obviously he had a couple of picks in that game just on the handful of off throws. I do think he was much better against Arizona. I do think as the game wore on, he did get much better. And, you look at the end of the third quarter and throughout the fourth quarter, with the exception of one bad throw he had to Ridley on the goal line that was nearly picked off, I think he was pretty lights out down the stretch in this Arizona game. And I too sort of hope that this is going to kickstart we will start to see more of Matt Ryan for the remainder of the season, because typically, from my expectations and my impression and observations, you usually get like 2 C-level games from Matt Ryan a year, and then the rest is B's and A's. And I feel like this year we've gotten like 4 C-level games. So I'm hoping he's got all that out of his system, and I'm hoping that some of the things we talked about with the scheme improving, and again, incremental improvements week by week, that by the time, as the rest of the season unfolds, we will have a scheme more reminiscent of the schemes that the Falcons have been running in past years, where we have seen a lot more positive play from Matt Ryan.
I have one more on the Twitter if you want, unless
I got one more quick one on the chat. When will Lindstrom be back? Have we figured out what the rule is? Because I haven't been paying too much attention.
I haven't looked at it further. I mean, it's at least
is it week 10 or week 11?
It's at least 8 weeks, if not 8 games. So it's either going to be week 10, week 11.
Week 10 if it's 8 weeks, and week 11 if it's 8 games, right?
Right. So it's one or the other. But again, kind of like how Deion Jones was. Deion Jones didn't come back right at that 8-week or 8-game mark. So, I think if we're erring on the side of caution, probably not until week 11, week 12, and probably more week 12 is when I'd start really thinking that that's when he's going to be back. And again, depending on how far this season spirals out of control, how aggressive do you want to get bringing him back? Because again, he's a centerpiece for the future. He's your first round pick. There's no sense rushing him in a lost season.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't rush him back from injury in the event that there's a chance of aggravating that injury. But I certainly think getting him some reps before the year is up makes a lot of sense for him, given how young he is, and he's a young guy, needs reps. So yeah, I'm with you. I think again, barring the Falcons going on like a 3 or 4 game win streak at this point in time, I think you're probably right that we don't necessarily need to rush him back. But certainly, try to get him back in the lineup at some point. If that's, week 13, week 14, I still think it's worthwhile.
Yeah, I'm in no means saying we should shut him down. Just there's no rush at this point, based on how the season's gone. This one from Dirty Bird number 2, fairly easy one, at Matty MVP Ryan. Do you think this will be Matt Ryan's last year with the Falcons / NFL? Matt Bryant.
Matt Bryant, yeah.
Matt Bryant,
yeah, that's been my assumption pretty much all along.
Yeah. Again, depending if this season had gone better, and again, it's not over, but the way it's going, it's close to being over.
Okay, it's not over. Yeah, technically, yeah, it's not over. I guess we have to technically.
The thing is, if they win this week, as I'm predicting, and then I don't know if I'm going to be able to predict a Seattle win because Russell Wilson right now is my MVP through 6 weeks. They're 2-6. You basically have to win out in the NFC to even sniff it. Maybe 9-7 gets in. I doubt it. The only thing that comes up to me is Dan Quinn's been very good in the NFC South, except for his rookie season as a head coach. I believe he's been 4-2 or better. Correct me if I'm wrong. So again, you split with New Orleans, and if you can run the table against the rest of them, which Carolina's been playing well, so that's a tough ask. But you go 5-1, you start opening up the discussion. But
I mean, they kind of you're basically you're right, but basically they can only afford to lose one game the rest of the season at this point in time, right?
You don't think 9-7 at all, probably, right? Is a wild card in the
I mean, you already lost the tiebreaker to Minnesota. I mean, you really can't lose to Seattle at that point because they're going to be in the thick of the wild card, and so you don't want to lose that tiebreaker. Then, of course, you have all the divisional stuff, so you can't really. You have to sweep Carolina, you have to sweep New Orleans, kind of. Then again, you have to win the Rams because they could get their season back on track, just so you can own all the tiebreakers. And so, what game can you really afford to lose then, other than maybe Jacksonville and San Francisco at this point?
Yeah, I mean, had they won against the Cardinals this past week, you could say, well, 3 of their 4 losses are in the AFC. That actually is not such a bad thing when it comes to NFC playoff ramifications. But the fact that they lost to the Cardinals, having that one that's supposed to be a layup gimme game, yeah, it makes the road that much tougher. All that to say, again, if this was not a lost season and they were, close to being a contender, I could see Bryant, playing the 1-year game. But at this point, I think there's a very good chance that this is his last year with the Falcons and likely with the NFL, because I think he wants to finish it as a Falcon at this point. I don't think he wants to kick anywhere else.
Yeah.
So I think that's all we got on the Twitter, unless you got any more or any last minute thoughts.
We got a couple of interesting questions on the chat. 50 Millie asks, what if Matt Ryan and Julio Jones tell Arthur Blank they want Quinn to be the coach? What if they just like Quinn way of coaching? It will be smart for Arthur Blank to include Julio and Ryan. I don't know about that. I don't think players should be consulted on the coach. I think the owner has full discretion to hire the best candidate, and if he's consulting players on that, then there's usually a problem with that. But
I don't disagree with any of that. And I think too, what do you usually expect? I would always expect the players to endorse their coach. I mean, I saw it last year with Sark, Matt Ryan talking up Sark and saying how he was getting comfortable in his scheme, and that had a lot to do with his successes last year, and we saw what happened. So, they could like Quinn as a head coach and his style and how he's a true players coach, but I don't think it's their place necessarily to do so. And I think it has to be on Arthur Blank to make that call. And again, I think it's a fairly easy one at this point. So I would agree with you there.
Yeah, I mean, I would like Arthur Blank to think of Matt Ryan and Julio Jones and what's best for them with whoever he hires the next coach.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I don't think he should get their input on who that person should be.
Right.
But he certainly should be hiring the person that he thinks is going to be able to maximize those guys' potential, and someone who, will leave the hashtag establish the run movement by the wayside. If you personally ask me, but we'll see about that. But there you guys have it. Appreciate everybody for doing the live call-ins and submitting their questions via Twitter as well as in the YouTube chat. We enjoy you guys being part of the discussion on these shows, and we'll be back next week to do more discussion on whatever the outcome of this Rams game, whether Matt wants to fall into the Hall of Shame by predicting a win on this show, which has not gone well for anybody over the last couple of weeks, starting with me with that Tennessee game. And Johnny last week So you guys can join us by checking us out on YouTube. Pro Football Central is the YouTube page. Make sure you subscribe, hit that bell icon so you know when we go live. Make sure you like this video as well. And of course, leave any comments on any suggestions and criticisms and positivity that you guys have for us in the show and its format and its content, and for future shows, so we can find other ways to improve and make the best show possible for you. Check us out on Facebook, Falcon Central Radio. There, you can check us out at profootballcentral.com. You can find all the links to the audio version of the show. You can find links on Apple Podcasts, iTunes. I guess iTunes doesn't exist anymore, right? Stitcher, other podcasting platforms. And of course, check us out on Twitter. The show's Twitter handle is Falcons PFC. Of course, Matt and my Twitter handles are on the screen in front of us, but for you audio listeners, that is at FalcFans for myself and at Matt Karoly, MattKaroly, ROLY. Sorry, I don't think I spelled it right. Matt, anything you want to add before we duck out?
No, just echo some of your thoughts. I mean, yeah, please leave some comments, what we're doing well, what we're doing not so well. I mean, I definitely check them out. Big part of the reason why we have this all 22 breakdown is based on a comment that we gotten on a past show. So we definitely look at them. We take them under consideration. So we want to know what we're doing well, what we can improve upon. We appreciate, all your feedback, all your input, all your questions. Really appreciate everyone that's called in. We certainly want to hear from more people. Not that we don't like hearing from Zamir and John and Justin, but we want as many new callers as we can get. So, again, you don't have to have your video up. We don't need to see your face if you don't want to show your face, but we want to hear from you, hear your thoughts on the Falcons and, what you've disliked and what you're looking forward to seeing from the future. So, again, thanks for tuning in, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Have a good night, guys.